we started to build out a mini call center at that point. We were outbound calling, but we weren't calling cold call lists. But we were going into our database in Builder Prime. Not only were we calling past customers, we were also calling the customers that canceled, the demo no sales, even the customers that we gave a proposal to that didn't sell. We'd call them 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later. And you'd be surprised how many of those customers just put the project on hold, would say, yeah, you know what, let's move forward.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Build to Win podcast, where we talk about tools and tech for the smart contractor. I'm Jonathan Weinberg, co-host of the podcast. I'm founder and CEO of Builder Prime, the all-in-one business management platform for home improvement contractors. And I'm here with my co-host, John Kolbaska, founder and visionary for Windows and Doors by the Men with Tools. And we're excited to talk to you about the next step in the journey from 0 to 10 million for the home improvement contractor. We've been talking each episode about breaking through the different ceilings as you go from 0 to 10 million in revenue. And last time we talked about the 1 to 2 million range. How do we get from 1 to 2? So today we're going to focus on how do we get to that next level, going from 2 million to 5 million. And, John's the perfect guy to talk about this, right? We're going to talk about his journey. We're going to talk about, what I've seen from other people that I work with in the industry as well. So excited to dive in. You ready to go, John?
I'm ready to go, Johnny.
Well, let's do it. All right. So I think maybe what we can do is we can start out about just talking a little like your journey, right? You went through this journey. We were just talking before about 2021. You went from 1.9 million to 5 million in that 1 year. So, which is an impressive feat to accomplish, to get that kind of growth in 1 year. So let's talk about that. We're going to talk about what the org chart looked like. We're going to talk about the tech stack. We're going to talk about what it looks like from a marketing, sales, and production process point of view. But maybe start with a little bit of the story for yourself, John. What did it look like for you going from 1.9 to 5 million in 2021?
It started with a plan, right? So that the plan, I had sat down because it was still me and basically an admin and one salesperson and a couple of installers. So I sat down and planned the year out in late 2020, and I drew it all out. I reverse engineered it, how many salespeople I was going to need, what the marketing department was going to look like, how many raw leads I was going to need, how many leads I was going to need to set, how many leads I was going to need to issue, and how many I was going to need to demo. And that was really the first year that I had sat down and really planned it out. And it's incredible when you do something like that, because the story there is, for years I'd muddled around, 500 and 800, 600 million. Then I did 1.9 in 2020. So I got stuck really in that first part, that 0 to 1 million for many years. Then learned how to break through that in 2020 to go to that 1.9. Really sat down and really planned it all out to get aggressive, right? To go from 1.9 to 5 in 1 year. So like I said, I reverse engineered everything out, built the org chart, looked at it. And the true story there is, on the very last business day of 2021, I believe it was like December 29th or 30th, because we closed for the holiday, the very last appointment of 2021, my sales rep reported like a $70,000 sale. So that was the largest sale of the whole year. And we literally closed out at like $5,012,000 on the very last sale of the year, the last report. And then I went to holiday, and I had actually accomplished that goal. So I can talk to you about, what I did, how I planned that out, what that looked like. But that, to go from 1.9 to 5 million in one single year was incredible, right? Not many people do that, right?
And obviously, I'm sure there was a little bit of, momentum with COVID, right? I mean, there was a boom in the industry, but not everybody knew how to capitalize on that, right? So the planning, I mean, you put the plan in place so that you were able to capitalize on that type of a boom. But maybe let's take a step back for a moment and talk a little bit more about the reverse engineering, and where did you start with? First, you set the goal for 5 million. Is that correct? So you set out the beginning of 2021, or when you were planning in 2020 that you were going to hit 5 million by the end of the year.
5 million.
And then you figured out profit margin and different things like that as part of that reverse engineering, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I had done before I actually sat down and reverse engineered the numbers is I started to think about what my business would look like, right? The org chart. Because like I said, I believe at the end of 2020, again, this is 4 or 5 years ago now, it was myself running leads, doing sales with a salesperson. I had an admin or two in the office answering phones, and I had an install team of like 4 or 5 guys, right? So I realized that if I was gonna take advantage of this COVID boom, and I was gonna realize this growth, that I needed to start investing into people, right? I needed to redevelop the org chart. So I sat down. I believe this is like every year at the end of November, right between the holidays, I'll sit down and I'll figure out, like, from then and now, I plan out what the next year is going to look like. And I always start with the org chart. So the new org chart, I added 2 positions primarily. I added a sales manager, right? And a marketing, well, you can't really call him a director, but some people could, but like a marketing manager. So my goal was to, going into 2021, hire a marketing person, because I was handling all of that in 2020, and hire a sales manager to manage the sales team. Because again, I was running leads, and I was going to get myself completely out of the sales team, and I was going to just focus on the business, just from the top level, right? So what do they call it? Working on the business, not in the business, right? So I started to really dedicate and wrap my mind around becoming the person that's pulling the strings, like the puppet master at the top. Now I was still working then, but the org chart basically, like I said, I believe I had 1 or 2 admins. I needed 1 or 2 people to answer the phone to do that 5 million. I needed 3 salespeople plus a sales manager, right? And I had to have a marketing director. So 2021, January 7th, I hired Tom, who's still with me today. Now, he's my marketing director because he has a large marketing team around him, but it was just him in a basement of my showroom in a little cubicle that we had built out. And he was working in a basement, and he started to really focus in on our digital marketing, right? We were just going after digital. So he started hired him, like I said, January 7th, or I'm not exactly sure the dates, but early January 2021, and said, hey, we're going to do this marketing. We set budgets and we went on. And then a few weeks later, I had hired a sales manager who's no longer with me, and a few salespeople. But early in the year, I had a sales manager and I had 3 full-time sales reps pretty consistently through that year, right? And we built out the install team as the production capacity warranted. I think we added maybe 1 or 2 installers and a second truck that year.
Yeah. And then you're reverse engineering, the cost for, that type of an organization, factoring that in. So, when you hire that sales manager, when you hire that marketing director, when you hire those sales reps, you're still going to have that bottom line that you're setting out to achieve, right? So,
yeah. So it's not to get too complicated, but if you know your numbers, and we'll probably speak about this more in future episodes, but it's called the contribution margin. It's learning, when you add an expense, how much more do you need to sell to cover that expense, right? So, Mark Curry, Brian Kay, they run a program with the Profit Masters. It's an annual meetup where a bunch of contractors go. And I had learned this, I believe, in September of 2021. Yes. So anytime you add a position, you have to figure out how much more revenue you need to sell. Any expense, a truck, right, or a new lease or a new employee. You have to figure how much more revenue do you need to generate based on your profit model to at least break even, right, and go beyond. So this is how you make important decisions. So it's called the contribution margin. Admittedly, probably in 2021, early, probably didn't really do that. I just said, I'm going to hire these positions and we're going to do more money. And it worked out because I believe that year I made like an 18% net profit on the bottom line.
Yeah.
So that was the first year I became significantly profitable in this business in 44 years of my life. Yeah. I struggled for 43 years, 43 years to really make a good living in this industry. And that's the first year I had done so.
You weren't doing it in the womb as well? I mean, you know.
Yeah, I made all the mistakes, buddy. All the mistakes.
So, we usually talk about the tech stack, but I think maybe let's talk about the tech stack as we go through the different like departments and processes, in those departments. Because I think it's going to be more relevant there. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the marketing side of the business. And obviously, you hired the marketing director. Big focus on digital leads.
I actually hired him as a digital marketing manager. So the title marketing director was foreign to me. I was a small company and I was like, hey, I need a guy to do all my digital marketing. I mean, I was doing that prior to hiring Tom. I was doing it. I had Facebook ads set up. I had Google AdWords. And I was kind of running it for a while. And then I've had outside agencies doing it. And I just, I need to take this in-house and just have someone just focus on this full time. I found that worked better for me. I know companies that grow by hiring outside marketing agencies that handle that for them. But for me, in my case, I wanted it in-house. I wanted to see it. I wanted to be able to touch it. I wanted to be able to see exactly what it was costing me and have that person right shoulder to shoulder with me every single day to be able to understand it. So,
yeah, I mean, this is so core to being, to the success of the business. I mean, it's, something I think you just have to have in-house.
So most importantly on the marketing side is, again, this is all mindset, right? This is growing through these. It's what I find is it's always the mindset of the owner, right? So we have all these limiting beliefs. And a lot of times this holds people back, right? So like I said, for 42 years, 43 years, however long it was, I didn't realize that this was possible, right? Until I went to a few industry events and I saw a lot of guys just like me there doing $5, $50, $100 million. And I said, wow, I didn't even know this was possible, right? So it was getting my mindset ready also for committing to investing, right? A certain amount of money in marketing to be able to do those numbers. Notice how I said investing. It's an investment. When you can learn to spend X amount of dollars and get an X return, whatever that model is built on, some companies smaller companies, well, not small, but most companies that don't have a sophisticated marketing department, they'll run anywhere from 3% of their revenue. And there's some companies that, run all the way up to 20, 22% very aggressively. For me, it was 10%. So when I reverse engineered it that year, said, I'm going to do 5 million. I'm going to commit to investing $500,000 spread out over the year to be able to do that, right? Not spending, right? See the difference between the two. Investing and spending, right? That's a mindset thing, right? So I knew that although I knew how to market for many years, SEO, and I knew how to do a lot of those things, I knew that I needed to bring someone in that was an expert on that, or that was better than me, right? That was, even though I was good at it, and it necessarily wasn't a weakness, it was just something that I needed to outsource, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about similar things in and even in the software world, right? I mean, a lot of times when you have a founder starting out with a software business, it's great to have the founder originally doing and getting a good idea of all of these different processes, and then you go and you hire somebody that can do it better. But having a bit of an understanding about, what it takes to generate a lead is just going to help you be that much more successful and help you hold those team members accountable for the results as well.
It's just incredible, Johnny, because it's like 2 years prior to that, right? If you had told me that I was going to be, and I'll use the word spending because that would have been the word then, $500,000 on marketing, I would have told you that you're effing crazy. I would have been like, there is no way I'm going to spend $500,000 on marketing. And just getting out, going to industry events, meeting people, listening to podcasts like this, it really opened my eyes to realize that, this is possible, right? But in order to do that, you got to change the mindset. You got to get rid of those limiting beliefs, and you got to take certain actions.
That's scary, right? I mean, that's what you're spending, the 60 grand a month, something like that. That the calculation work out. But anyway, my math might be off on the spot, but it's a lot of money to spend, in a month, if that's, or invest in a month, if you're not used to those types of numbers, right? I mean, how do you?
$500,000, John.
What's that?
It's $500,000, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, that's scary to the average contractor. The guys that are starting out, the guys that are in a 0 to 1 million, even that 1 to 2, it's like $500,000. Are you kidding me? Like, think about what I could do with that $500,000. But you got to invest it to make it. God bless you if you have a business that's been around and you got, you're doing $5-10 million with $100,000 marketing budget. I've heard people claim that they have that. I'm sure there are, but I don't think it's the norm. God bless you if that's the case. More power to you. Reach out to us. We'll get you on the podcast. I'd love to know. I'd love to learn from you, right? So, but yeah, it was just getting the mindset wrapped around that I needed to invest $500,000 to be able to do that. Those numbers.
And if you think about what the typical marketing cost is, I think we talked about this on one of the previous episodes already. That's a 10% marketing cost. That's not for, it's 10% of the 5 million, right? So if you think you're going to do 5 million, you should be spending 500K, right? Or something, right around there.
I mean, that's the industry average. Like I said, I know I've heard of companies having a 3% marketing spend on 5 million,
it's not
10 million.
Very common.
I mean, it's not very common, but there are people that do it. I find that those are typically companies that have been in business a very long time, so they're well known. They have an excellent reputation in the market. They probably have already serviced thousands upon thousands and thousands of customers. I hadn't at that point. I mean, I more or less started my business. Well, not started it, but got serious where I started going direct to the homeowner in 2017. So I was 3 years in at this point. Although people knew me, I mean, I probably only installed close to 1,000 jobs at that point, right? So I didn't have that luxury. And there's companies, like I said, that invest 20% on 5 million. So, 5%, there's companies that'll invest $1 million in marketing to do 5. And again, it's not wrong, right? Because when we'll talk about finances and stuff, when you look at your P&L at the end of the year or at the end of every month, and end of every quarter, year, whenever you're doing that, the bottom line is the bottom line. So I know companies that invest 20% in marketing, right? But they still drop a healthy net profit to the bottom line. And then I know other companies that invest 5%, 7%, where they drop nothing to the bottom line. So again, your model, the way you model it all out, it's up to you. But at the end of the day, your P&L, that net profit, as the owner, CEO, president, that's your scorecard, right? That tells you how well you're doing in this business. Because it's easy to be busy. Matter of fact, most of the companies I've seen go out of business in the past were busy. They're always busy, right? They've always got too much work and not enough money, don't charge enough, or their expenses are too high, and it's just that race to the bottom, right? So we got a little off track there, but that had to be thrown in there. But on the marketing side, it's like I said, that's a very important point, is to just get your mind wrapped around investing into your marketing, however much that may be, right? Whatever percentage of revenue is.
Yeah, and going back to the 3%, the people are doing maybe 3% investment. They're, like you said, bigger. Their brand is more valuable at that point. But I always say technology is democratizing, right? I mean, it levels the playing field so that you have to spend a little bit more, perhaps, or you can spend a little bit using technology, and you can bridge that gap and even the playing field with some of the bigger players. So that's one of the beautiful things about it. Why don't we talk about that? You hired a digital marketing manager. Obviously, these are online ads or online, lead generation sources. So let's talk a little bit about how you did that. What did Tom come in and do to scale up the leads that you were generating for the business?
Yeah, I mean, I was already marketing on Google Ads, Facebook, Instagram, but not very effectively. Like, for example, on Facebook, I was boosting posts, right? So I hadn't realized that. I thought I was spending money and was reaching people. But what was really happening was I was only reaching a small portion of the market. When you boost a post on Facebook, and again, I had no clue, you were just boosting the post to the people that currently liked your page, right? So friends, family, past customers, they were getting all of my marketing messaging, right? And I wasn't reaching beyond that, right? I wasn't casting the net into people that were currently looking for my service. I thought, oh, I'm doing a great job. So Tom came in, he fixed that. He set up lookalike audiences, which immediately helped. Created a bunch of different audiences targeting our ideal clients. Actually discovered who our ideal clients were on Facebook and Instagram. So immediately we started generating more leads on the social media sites. And on AdWords, I was spending money there, but on a lot of unnecessary keywords. So, broad search terms and stuff like that. So Tom came in, he evaluated what I was doing, eliminated a lot of keywords, added new keywords in that were more specific to what our clients were searching for. So I'll give you an example. Before Tom, right? BT or BC, like before BT in the marketing. And it's funny because we talk about that around the office. So BT before Tom, my number one keyword that I was targeting was replacement windows, right? On AdWords. And it was a very expensive click. It was like $15, $18 a click back then. And, but that's a broad search term, right? So people can go in and just type replacement windows for, like people that want to do a little research on how to fix a replacement window, repair a replacement window. Maybe, there's no buying intent there, right? That's the top of the funnel where people may start searching, right? So Tom's like, hey, we don't get any conversions from that. We spend a lot of money. Let's start focusing on the lower level, not the lower, the more intentional keywords like replacement window contractor, right? Or window replacement. Switch to two words and there's more intention, right? So replacement windows is more top of the funnel, but window replacement, customers now looking to get their windows replaced, right? So he went in, he fixed that all up again, and we started generating higher quality leads, better leads. It was mostly digital at first. We did focus on a little bit of print advertising. We started really focusing on building our customer list too in Build a Prime and remarketing to them, right? So we had where before we had maybe like a 7% repeat referral rate. And not because we didn't do good work. We do great work, right? But we started reaching out to our customers, emailing. We weren't text messaging back then. Build a Prime didn't have that functionality yet.
Yeah, maybe not yet, yeah.
We were emailing, we were calling, and we weren't harassing them. We were probably sending out an email once a month, a phone call once a quarter. And we started asking them for, hey, do you have any family and friends that you can refer to us? I started working with Brian Kay there in the G4 marketing. We were sending out gift packages after the installs with the cookies and a $500 gift card, family and friends. So we started focusing on repeat referral rate. And by the end of that year, it went from like 3 to 7% the year before to 30% of all of our new business was repeat and referral. Yeah.
That's huge.
But, these are holes when you're working on everything in the business, that $0 to $2 million range as the operator, you don't know you have these holes, right? So hiring Tom, he came in, he looked at all the marketing that I was currently doing, and he's like, hey, we'll fix this. We'll fix this. Let's add this in. And it's really what more or less brought us up to the, like I said, the $5 million range there.
Yeah. So when you were remarketing, I'm curious a little bit more about this, right? When you're remarketing to your existing list, I guess you can segment this, right, in terms of past customers as well as, people that never bought in the first place, right? But when you go into like the past customers,
you can build prime.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But when you go into the past customers, are you going with a like, hey, we can also do doors? Or is it, do you know, like, hey, they didn't do the whole house of windows. Maybe they did the first level and they didn't do the second level. What's your approach there?
Oh yeah, I mean, all of that data is in Build a Prime, and like I said, we were Build a Prime users before, so Tom was going into the Build a Prime to CRM, and he was accessing that data, and he was sending out custom messages, right? So yeah, most of our customers don't replace their whole house of windows, right? They'll do 5, 6, 8. Average customer has 12 to 18 windows. So we would just actually, we automated email messaging. Remember? We were able to automate a year after where we would ask, but I mean, we did a lot of custom emails and phone calls where we would reach out and say, hey, we're running a special right now for our previous clients, 20, 30% off, whatever the deal was. Let's get the rest of your home finished up, or let's add on that entry door, right? So, but all of that data is in Build a Prime, right? And that was a big part of the marketing too, was having access to the lead sources, the customer data, right? Where before, again, although Build a Prime had it, I probably wasn't paying much attention to it because I was busy doing a million things, right? So having a person like Tom that could dive down into the data, look at what's going on, that really, that's what helped get us there too.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So, so just to maybe recap a little bit on the marketing side of things. So we got still a lot to cover on sales and production. In terms of tech stack, obviously we talked about Builder Prime, and we talked about using that MyNet database. And I love a lot of the things that, if anyone's interested, Megan Beatty does some great talks on actually utilizing the leads that are in your database already. You don't always have to generate a brand new lead. There's so much that you can do with your existing leads. So look for some information there from Megan, but she does a great job with that.
Oh, now that you brought up Megan, right?
Yeah.
Again, see, if you get these things, you start talking about it, and then
Sure.
Things become more clear. We started to build out like a mini call center at that point. We weren't like outbound calling, cold call list. Like we were outbound calling, but we weren't calling cold call lists. But we were going into our database and Build a Prime. And not only were we calling past customers, we were also calling the customers where their appointment may have canceled. The demo no sales, even the customers that we gave a proposal to that didn't sell. We'd call them 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later. And you'd be surprised how many of those customers just put the project on hold because they didn't have the financing at that point, or they wanted to hold off for whatever reason, that would say, yeah, you know what, let's move forward. So we started to build that out with Megan, where we put some scripts in place for outbound calling existing clients, and then also having a process for taking the inbound lead, right, and qualifying it, right? So we just became much more sophisticated on the marketing side, right? Rather than just, hey, get a lead, here it is, call the customer, okay, what's your name, address, phone number, what's a good day, and so run the lead, right? It was just that we were more specific. We started to ask questions. Like when you're thinking about starting the project, what is it that you're looking to do? Making sure that it was window or door replacement rather than repair, because Lord knows they call you up and they'll tell you, I'm looking for a new window, and it could be a piece of glass, right? So it's just questions that you need to ask. And working with Megan and Tony Hody and those guys really helped us be able to identify that.
Or even worse, they're asking for, they're asking to replace their Windows, and they're looking for a Mac or a Linux computer. I remember taking a few of those calls, actually.
That probably has happened. And, you remember this, right? When you were taking the phone calls, mm-hmm. The company name originally was the Men with Tools Home Remodeling, right? So we've gone through a couple of iterations, and we finally settled in on Windows and Doors by the Men with Tools today. And the reason we did that was because everybody assumed we were a handyman. Remember, John?
Sure. Yeah.
They call in, I want to paint my ceiling, my faucet's leaking. And we had to tell them, like, no, we're a window and door contractor, right? So, we had to become better on the phones, taking the lead, whether it was inbound or outbound, taking the information and really qualifying it, confirming it, making sure that we weren't wasting the customer's time or our salesperson's time too.
Yeah, for sure. So you know what? I know I was looking to move on to the next segment here, but I think we should talk a little bit more about the call center and what that what that started to look like and how that evolution occurred, because that's a key part of the marketing side, right? So, I mean, the first thing you did was you hired Tom, and we talked about, generating leads and digital ads and, Google ads and Facebook and Instagram, things like that. But let's talk a little bit more about the call center. When did you hire somebody to be in the call center? Was this really the admins making a transition and that becoming the call center, or what was that like?
So we had a person answering the phones, but a few weeks after Tom had been hired, we had both sat down and discussed the need for a small call center. So we immediately hired a call center manager, right, with experience. And we hired her, and she built the team of, like I said, 1 or 2 people. It was a small call center. But just a few weeks later, we knew on the org chart, I had a call center manager. See, all these things are now coming back. So I showed Tom what the org chart, I told Tom what we were trying to accomplish, the 5 million, gave him all the numbers, showed him the org chart. And slowly he and I started to put that plan in place. So I believe I hired him I hired him early January. By the first week of March, we had a call center manager that we had hired that had moved into our area from out of state. And this person had run large call centers, not in our industry, but 50 people on staff, even some remote call centers. This person was managing teams, couple hundred people in-house and remotely. So she had a ton of experience with working with and recruiting and hiring, training, retaining call center agents. So we got lucky there. So yeah, she helped us build out a small mini call center at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just inbound, well, not just inbound, but inbound leads and making calls, or previous leads making calls. That was pretty much the strategy there, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And all the, again, asking questions, qualifying, and then also being able to record it in Build a Prime, right? Or in your CRM, right? So that there was notes, right? There just wasn't a name, address, telephone number, an email address, right? You could see, the past interactions you had with the customer, what they were looking for, if you'd set an appointment, if it issued, if it canceled. So you would see all of that. So you knew as you were digging, the marketing team knew, call center, as they were digging through the database, what to say or what script to use when we had reached out to them, right? So because each script is different, right? You're going to approach the phone call differently for a customer that you've already done work with compared to a customer where they may have set an appointment 3 months ago, had something come up, had to cancel the appointment. We didn't get a chance to go see them, and then they got busy, right? So you were able to see that information in Build a Prime and make they were able to make that the phone call accordingly, right? Able to set them. So we became much more sophisticated.
Yeah. And I guess once you reach that about 2 million threshold, your database should be sizable enough that you've got plenty of leads to mine in there.
Sure.
In addition to the new ones, looking at all those old ones.
I don't have I could probably dig it up, but it's probably buried in an old Google Drive somewhere. But there was still, to do 5 million, there was still 1,000 or 2,000 raw leads that were needed to be able to do that, if I remember correctly, right? 500, you're looking at approximately back then, 500 jobs. 500 jobs, you got a 33% closing rate. So that means 1,500 appointments, right? Right. Yeah. 1,500 sales appointments. Average sales rep can run between 400 and 500. So you see 300. Yeah. I'm sorry. 3 sales reps. So yeah, you were probably looking at close to 2,000 inquiries, raw leads, to be able to do that number, that 5 million. So, that very year, we had 2,000 people, 2,000 new customers or potential customers in Build a Prime.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite a database, right?
Yeah. Powerful. Mm-hmm. So, all right, let's move on to the sales side of things, right? So you're, to reach that 5 million mark, you're hiring the sales manager. You're hiring 2 or 3 sales reps. Maybe talk a little bit about how you think about the size of the sales team, in terms of their quota and, what the expectation is. Because, I mean, you've reverse engineered all of this already, right? So what each sales rep generally needs to close. So how do you think about that? And also from a hiring perspective, maybe talk about what you look for when trying to hire sales reps for the organization.
What I look for now or what I looked for back then? Because back then it was anybody who could fog a mirror. But again, let me start with the mindset. I had to commit to that year getting out of the sales team, right? So like I said, at that 1 to 2 million, it was myself and one other sales rep. I was running at least half the leads. I had to commit to getting out and trusting the system and the process that I had started to create, right? So although I'm yet to find a sales rep, even to this day, that can sell as good as me in the home, right? I had to accept the fact that, yeah, I can go out and sell 3 million now, $4 million with a 50% close rate, right? And not like on the same system that they are, because I'm the expert. I had to accept the fact that I was probably not going to find another guy like me, and I was going to have to, accept 50 to 80% of the results that I would normally produce. But ultimately, there's only so much that I could do, right? So like 80% with 5 guys, 80% for 5 guys is better than me at 100%. So I had to commit to stepping out and never running another lead again. And still to this day, I've never run another lead. And we're in October 2024. I have not run a lead since the beginning of 2021. Yeah. I had to fully commit to that.
I have a little bit of a cheesy phrase that I always remember from a book that I read about delegation and helping you scale your company, where he says 80% of perfect, assuming you're perfect, right? 80% of perfect is 100% awesome, right? So if you're not doing it and they can get 80% of what you did, that's amazing.
And then, again, that's where most of these guys that get stuck between the 0 and 2, right? They'll sell for themselves, most of them, with no sales reps or one. And they're scared to get out because most of the owners that, they're experts in their company, in their business. And they typically over time learn to sell, whether they're doing it intentionally or not, whether they have a system. They become really good at it. So it's scary to say to an owner, hey, you need to step out of there and you need to train other people to do what you do, right? It's scary, right? And unfortunately, most people, they never make that decision, right? Or become committed to doing it after they make that decision. I did. Again, this is all mindset. And it's funny because it's like years later, Brian Kay released the seven Secrets to Becoming a Wealthy Contractor book. It's all in there, right? Like making the decision, becoming committed. It's like I read the book and I laughed. I'm like, oh, I did all of those things throughout the journey, right? But again, it's all wrapped around your mindset. So as the owner, I had to commit to getting out of sales, trusting that the sales system that I had purchased the year before was going to, be teachable, coachable, trainable, whatever you want to call it. And I was going to be able to teach that, give that to multiple people, and the results were going to be better long term than if I were going out and running leads every single day. So that's what we did. Stepped out, never run another appointment since then.
It can be hard to let go, though. It's hard. That's something that you feel like that's your part of your gift and what you're really good at. Especially that's the hardest.
Jonathan, I mean, I'll just tell you, like yesterday. Today is October 11th, 2024. Let's date it, right? I mean, we just had a record-breaking sales day yesterday, October 10th. We sold almost $200,000 in a single day.
That's awesome.
We're a $10 million company. If you sell $200,000 every single day, you're selling $1 million a week. that's a 50, 45, $50 million company when you account for slow periods. We had a day, yesterday where now I have 10 sales reps where they went out and they absolutely crushed it. Right.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have sold $200,000 in a day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Unless I
Yeah.
got lucky, right? Unless I got lucky and ran one large appointment and somehow closed it, right?
Yeah, but that's where, we talked about it the last time as well, but the sales system and the process is really so important, right? That's how you can scale it, to more than just yourself, and you can scale it, to a team. So that I'm not going to belabor that because we went into it quite a bit last time, but it's just so important to be able to do that. So you're a $10 million company now, right? Back then you're shooting for 5 million. I think you hired 3 sales reps in addition to the manager. So how do you think about that from like a quota perspective?
That year we had 2 sales reps full time and the sales manager. We might have hired another one, but we averaged probably about 3 sales reps, including the sales manager. So the sales manager was a working sales rep.
Okay.
Yeah. So he would run appointments.
Mm-hmm.
He was expected to run appointments. He was expected to do a weekly meeting where he would review the numbers with the sales reps at a local diner. I think you were probably present for some of those. Remember,
yes,
with myself, you probably sat in on some of those meetings with us. But yeah, I believe it was every Monday morning we'd go to the diner, myself, the sales manager, the team, and we'd review the numbers. And we started to track numbers. Right, we started to track demo rate, closing rate, GSLI, gross sales per lead issued, right? Because then cancellation rate, and then most importantly, NSLI, right? So we started to put together a scorecard for our sales reps, and we set a standard. It's like, you need a X closing rate, minimum. MAG, you need a minimum NSLI. And then if they were falling below, we immediately bring them in, retrain. If that didn't work, we would part ways as friends. There wasn't much turnover that year because, if you only have 3 people and you get, I guess you call it a little lucky, you get 3 solid guys at that level, it's fairly easy to do. It's scaling beyond that. At the next level, we'll talk about 5 to 10 becoming a people development organization. But right now, in this level, you're learning how to market and sell. So you need to become a marketing and sales organization.
Yep. So, and then do you have it in your mind that each sales rep is going to bring back $1 million or $1.5 million or somewhere just on average?
Yeah. Back then, the average sales rep I had figured would do anywhere between 1.2 million and 2 million. Now, admittedly, back then we were probably giving them 4 appointments a day. We were loading up their schedule. We had to learn that sometimes less is more there too. But they were running a lot of leads, and we had 2 of my guys. I think one guy did 2 for the year, and another guy did 1.8. So we did almost 4 million just with 2 guys. Yeah. But like I said, between 1.2 and 1.8 were what I had figured. So I just said, hey, 1.5, divide that by 5 million. How many reps do I need? And we had done it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that type of a quota, people are hitting it. You've got, depending on how many leads you're issuing, you've got a pretty good closing rate. You've got happy sales reps that are taking home, a good pay. And yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, again, when I reverse engineered it, it just wasn't on the marketing side, right? It was also on the sales side, right? Based on this closing rate, which I believe back then was 33%, we needed to sell this many jobs, right? At this NSLI, right? To be able to do that 5 million, right? So we were constantly working and monitoring those numbers on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So not only was Tom paying attention to the marketing numbers, I had my sales manager at the time paying attention to the sales numbers, and I was managing both.
calculate close rate on lead issued, or do you calculate it on demo?
So yeah, okay, that's a great question, right? And that's a debate here in the industry, right? So back then, I had calculated it based on the demo, right? And what I quickly learned was if you allow the sales rep to determine whether it was a qualified lead or not, what you would find is, if you had a lazy sales rep, somebody who wasn't feeling up to it would go in and say, oh, this was unqualified, because maybe something the customer may have said to him at the door, right? Got some objections at the door and he would just rush through it, not sell it, spend 15, 20 minutes in there and be like, all right, I'll email it to you. And then the sales rep would report back, hey man, that lead wasn't very good. That was a repair. And then you'd call the customer and you'd quickly find out like, no, your sales rep came in, brushed me off. I wanted to replace the whole house of windows. But then you saw in the notes when we took the lead, customers concerned about price. So what probably happened? Sales rep went in, started to follow the process. Customer's like, I'm not buying anything. I'm getting 10 estimates. And the sales rep prejudged was like, screw this. I'm out of here, and then said, hey, this was unqualified. And then it wouldn't count against the numbers. So what I had to learn was screw that. I don't care. Right. If I issue it to you, the lead, meaning you drive out there, even if they don't show up at the door, right? No demo, right? No demo, no show. It still counts against your numbers. Now that gives us the control, right? To be able to determine, right? To be able to set certain numbers and certain standards, right? So we have control of that. Don't ever put that kind of control in your sales reps' hands, because I'm telling you right now, you'll quickly learn. And the larger you grow, anytime you create something, new process, new pay structure, whatever it is, they will find ways to manipulate it. They're pretty damn good at that. So you have to really think about, anytime you're going to introduce something new within the sales organization, you have to kind of talk to a couple of different people and pick it apart and see like, well, what can they do? So stuff like that. So again, the point of the matter here is you want to be able to maintain the control of how a lead is, the result of an appointment is reported. So although I know lots of people at my level and even larger than me that report on the demo, and God bless them, that just means to me, that means the data is not very accurate on the sales side.
Yeah. And this is, I love asking you that question. I tend to take the opposite opinion. I mean, listen, I'm not operating a home improvement business myself, but I tend to take the opposite side of that debate, because I think there's other, anyway, we can get into that another time. Let's
quickly talk about that. I want to know.
All right.
I think it's good for the, because I think that's so important for a company to get to 5 million, right? That really, that's one of the things that helped catapult us there, right? When I started to take control of my business, right? When I started to define, right, what I was looking for, again, because I'm the guy at the top now, right? I'm working on the business, not in the business, right? So it's like, to get these numbers, I need to reverse engineer. I need these numbers, and I need to define how these numbers are reported, right? So that it's accurate to the end of the year. And like I said, I sold 5 million on the last appointment, on the last working day of the year. So it seemed to work. So tell me why you take the other stance. And lots of people do.
Yeah. So I think the biggest reason is, and you may argue this, but I think it makes the demo rate numbers mostly meaningless, right? So your demo rate being the number of leads issued that actually demoed. And I think that's an important number, right? Because this way you can see, you might want to look at that demo rate in a few different contexts to understand, well, which leads are we struggling with from the time that we issue to the time that we demo. And if you're really only paying attention, and I'm not saying that you are, but if you're really only paying attention to a lead being issued, you don't necessarily care if it's a demo or not. You from the sales rep's perspective, you got to close that lead. You got to close that deal.
What happens, John, is when you track it based on lead issue, the demo rate actually goes up.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Well, supposedly, and do you know that for sure? Or do you?
100%, because if you track it based on demo, right? He goes in and he just says, it was a no demo. It doesn't count, right? Like if you say, hey, sales guys, and most companies will hold them accountable to like closing rate or NSLI or revenue RPA, people call it, right? So if you say, here's 10 leads, right? Like we currently do. And let's just say we're tracking closing rate. You need to have a 30% closing rate. I issue you 10 leads, right? You go and you run all 10. They're all there, right? But now somebody gives you a little bit of junk at the door, resistance, right? That you give the sales rep the power to say, hey, those 3, they were junk. They don't count, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what happens to your demo rate?
Yeah, no, I get it. It goes down
70%. Yes.
Well, you're still tracking your demo rate. It's not that you're not tracking it.
Listen, this is something I just learned recently is demo rate is, so I used to track everything based on appointments, right? Like, well, I still track on the marketing side, sales side, raw leads to appointment set to issued leads. But until recently, it was how many leads did we issue, right? But what I realized recently is, yeah, that's great. But ultimately now when I reverse engineer these numbers, it's how many demos do I need, right? Mm-hmm. How many demos? Because if I have this many demos and I have this closing rate, right, and this average sale, I can predict the revenue pretty easily, right? So I still track all those other things. Those are just indicators, right? So now like Tom and I, when we talk marketing, we talk about all those numbers, but the only number I want to know from him is how many demos did you get me last week? Okay.
Yeah. Right. So it's
very important. Demo rate. Like we still demand 90% or more, right? Like if you're not demoing 9 out of 10 of the leads that we give you, we have a problem because we have a call center that takes the lead, gets the correct information, confirms it, qualifies it, confirms it the day of. Like there's multiple touch points before the sales rep is going out there to the customer's home. So you bet your ass, you better demo 9 out of 10 of them.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of so by measuring closing rate on lead issued, you're taking the demo rate out of the equation for the sales rep. You're not taking it out of the equation for the business, but you're taking it out of for the most part, you're taking it out of the equation for, the sales rep's got 2 numbers they got to hit, right? They got the closing rate and they got the NSLI or GSLI, NSLI.
But you still track it. You and your sales manager still track it. Yes.
You still track it. But you're not, if they're not getting the demo rate, that's on them, right? If they're not demoing, that's on them because then they're going to have lower closes. So you're not holding them as accountable for the demo rate as you would if you had things just separated out, right? You gotta hit your NSLI, you gotta hit your closing rate, and you gotta hit your demo rate.
Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, all right.
Again, I like to keep things very simple, right? When it comes to sales reps, it's like I just want them to know what their 30-day NSLI is. So when we go into a meeting, our weekly meetings, it's like, here's your NSLI. Here's the MAG, $3,500 or more. If you're below it, you're off track. If you're above it, great job, right? But the sales manager is still tracking GSLI, closing rate, average sale, demo rate, right? So that even though we just talk NSLI in the meeting, sales manager can see, Jack's demo rate is down, right? To, let's just say, 70% this week. What happened, right? And then we have other software and tech stack that we can talk about where you can go and actually listen to the appointment, and then he can correct the action before it becomes a problem, right? So the sales manager is still looking at all of that data, right? So again, if you let The sales reps say, well, that wasn't a demo because that was junk, right? You give them 10 and you only let them report on 7, right? If you're tracking demo, it can look like 100% demo rate to you because you let the sales rep define whether that was a good appointment he ran or not. Where in my way, it's like, I don't care. I issued you that lead. What'd you do with it? Did you demo it? Did you close it? So unless I'm missing you,
I don't disagree with you there. So maybe it's a little bit
the
of
great debate in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Listen, I go to mastermind meetings and events, and I know a couple hundred people from around the country that all own and operate similar businesses, right? And it's like the goddamn election, it's 50-50, right? And again, look, there's no right way or wrong way. There's just your way, right? And if you're tracking it and you have your own way of doing it, and it works for you, by all means, do it.
One
Should
or the
be doing something rather than just writing numbers down on a piece of paper and going.
One or the other. You can't be doing nothing. You got to do it's you can do either way, but as long as
you
you're
need
doing
to do a podcast on that debate there.
I know. Yeah, that would be
tracking sales numbers on lead issue or a demo.
That'll be fun. Yeah, we should ask all our guests that we bring on in the future. How are you doing?
You know what? Yeah, we're going to ask every single one of our guests in the future how they track and why, right? And we're going to see what the answers are because that's going to be interesting, right? And then, again, I know we got a little off track beyond the $2 to $5 million, but this is really when you need to start thinking about this, right? How are you going to define the numbers, right? This is very important for our listeners to hear this because, again, like I said, it's how you define those numbers when you plan. When you sit down the year prior and you plan those numbers, how am I going to define them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it all ties back. I mean, you're planning these things out when you're reverse engineering in the beginning of the year, or at the end of the prior year. So you got to make sure that you're actually hitting those things and find out where the problems are if you're not. So all right, awesome. Let's wrap up with production. So we're about a $2 million company. You're shaking your head.
I said, production. No. I mean, look, that was my background. So that was naturally, that was the easy part for me when I was building the company, 0 to 1, 1 to 2. I had recruited, started working with, right, had the tool belt on with a bunch of those guys in there. And those guys, most of those guys are still with me to this day. So, and I built a core of 3-4 guys that were doing great work. When I stepped out and put the hammer down, right, the tool belt down, that was again a decision at probably that $1 to $2 million mark. But I had a core group that knew how I wanted to install a window or install a door, right? They brought me to that $2 million mark. But for me to go to the 5, I needed to bring in new installers. So what I quickly discovered was I was bringing in new installers and with experience, but they were doing things their way, differently, right? So how you would cap a window, would it be on a 45 or, just lots of different ways. What type of insulation were they using, right? Like foam versus, bad insulation. A bunch of different ways, right? What type of screw? Like there's all different ways to install a window. So what I had to do was I had to create an installation checklist. So, and then we actually used it in our sales presentation, where we call it our thermal break installation system. 64 precise steps to install a window or a door properly, right?
And just if we can pause for a second, right? The 64 steps and putting that in your sales presentation. That's just a really powerful thing. Is you have those processes built out on the production side. You talk about it on the sales side. If somebody's going and getting other estimates and somebody doesn't talk about what that process is for installing the window.
Most of my competitors don't.
No, of course. And that's a huge advantage, right? One, yes, you need it for the production side, but it's such a powerful thing on the sales side too.
our windows are awesome. Our product is this and that, and our company, but won this award. And it's like, okay, but what about the most important part? The installation. But yes, that helped on the sales side, but it's not why I created it. I had to create that to be able to give it to new installers and say, look, this is how we do things here. This is our standard. Step one through step 64, you do it this way, right? And it really cleaned up a lot of the miscommunication between us and customers and expectations and stuff like that. Again, going from 1.9 to 5, that's a big jump, right? A lot of growing pains, right? So we experienced some upset customers that we had to go and fix things for and stuff like that as we were growing, as we were building out that production department. But once I created that thermal brake installation system, and then we started calling customers after and doing job site surveys and even walkthroughs, it really helped us to be able to rein all of that in and really scale that department up. But no installation manager at that point, no production manager at that point. Some companies do, but I didn't. I guess I was working in the business a little bit then, because I was the person that would go to the customer's house a week or two after the install. And again, we called all of our customers, right? Not the dissatisfied ones, like the happy ones. And we said, hey, John, the owner is willing to come out and just walk through your project and just double check and make sure everything's okay. So I was going to the jobs, the installs, probably half of them that year. And I was walking through and I was looking for, anything that may have been done, asked the customer questions, got feedback, were the guys neat and clean? Yes. Okay. I tested the windows, made sure they were square, the doors, they opened and closed properly. All the hardware was good. No screens were ripped. Like, I gave a full inspection, a post-installation inspection. And if I found anything, I ordered service, right? So, but they knew that I was holding them accountable. I guess I was kind of essentially doing, I had the role of like a part-time install manager, right? Right. So but there was accountability. There was a system created. There were standards, and then there was accountability, and it allowed us to. I think we had 3 or 4 installers at the end of 2020, and by the end of the year, we probably had 5 or 6. But we definitely went to a second truck.
Yeah, I love that inspection. I mean, I know that was the last thing that you delegated, right? And really gave up from your kind of in the business responsibilities, but I love that process.
That really helped improve our repeat and referral rate. And when I was doing it at this point, I didn't realize, although we do it now, I didn't ask for repeat business or for them to refer me. We do that now, right? But I would just be in the house looking at the windows, and the customer would be so impressed. And I said, you know what? I was thinking about doing the entry door. Go measure it up. Go measure the entry door. And I would measure it and send them a contract. And these, you didn't have to discount. You're getting full retail. Like, the customer wasn't sitting down and negotiating with you like they did on the first project with your sales rep. You just sent them a full retail, proposal, right? And it was like, yeah, order it. Here's the check. And like almost 100% of those customers signed the contract and gave a deposit after that.
Yeah. That's amazing, right? So yeah, you're holding the sales team accountable for following the process. I'm sorry, you're holding the production team accountable for following the process. You are making a great impression with the customer, improving your review. I'm sure you're getting more 5-star reviews as a result. Like,
I was asking for 5-star reviews, yes, through the G4 marketing. They had an app on your phone where you could put the customer's cell phone number and email address, and it would text them a link and they can click it. It was very easy, right? And also, we'll talk about the tech stack too. We started using Company Cam.
Yeah.
So we were able to see the job site, the pre-job site pictures, right? So during the measure, which I had one of my installers doing, the actual photos from the day of the install, and then any post-installation when I was doing that walkthrough photos, right? So if I'd seen something that I didn't like, that didn't meet my standards, and I ordered service, I could then go to my installers, because I knew who was there, and say, hey, this is not the way we do things here. This is wrong. Mm-hmm. And amazingly, it would not occur again because they were being held accountable. But you could do that with Company Camp. because you could show the photo, you could mark it up, you could put notes on there and stuff like that. So it allowed me to do that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's your $5 million company in a nutshell. At least was my $5 million company in a nutshell. Yeah. So what we can do in the next episode next week, John, is we can talk about the $5 to $10 million growth and all of those little pitfalls and lessons learned there.
Yeah. All right.
And then we can start to bring on guests that have done more than 10 million, right? Because I can't speak beyond that, at least right now in October of 2024.
Yeah.
But we'll have some awesome guests. I know a lot of people in the industry that are doing, 15, 20, 50. I even have a friend who's doing over $150 million. We'll bring him on the podcast here and talk about his journey. He'll probably be a guest on here multiple times, because we probably want him to talk about his journey through the levels and stuff like that, and the lessons
through all those different stages. Yeah. No, that's awesome. All right, exciting stuff to come. This has been great. I feel like this was just so much good stuff in this episode. So really excited about it. Hopefully it's helpful to everybody out there. And that's a wrap for this episode of Build to Win. So we'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in, guys.